Thank you. Okay, let's start with investor Q&A. The first question is, what is the status of 4680? What is the current output? Lars?
Sure. 4680 production increased about 18-20% from Q4, reaching greater than 1K a week for Cybertruck, which is about 7 gigawatt hours per year, as we posted on X. We expect to stay ahead of the Cybertruck ramp with the cell production throughout Q2 as we ramp the third of 4 lines in phase 1, while maintaining multiple weeks of cell inventory to make sure we're ahead of the ramp. Because we're ramping, COGS continues to drop rapidly week over week, driven by yield improvements throughout the lines and production volume increases. So our goal, and we expect to do this, is to beat supplier costs of nickel-based cells by the end of the year.
Thank you. The second question is on Optimus. So what is the current status of Optimus? Are they currently performing any factory tasks? When do you expect to start mass production?
We are able to do simple factory tasks, or at least I should say factory tasks in the lab. In terms of actually, we do think we will have Optimus in limited production in the actual factory itself, doing useful tasks before the end of this year. And then I think we may be able to sell it externally by the end of next year. These are just guesses. As I've said before, I think Optimus will be more valuable than everything else combined. Because if you've got a sentient humanoid robot that is able to navigate reality and do tasks at request, there is no meaningful limit to the size of the economy. So that's what's going to happen. And I think Tesla is best positioned of any humanoid robot maker to be able to reach volume production with efficient inference on the robot itself. This perhaps is a point that is worth emphasizing. Tesla's AI inference efficiency is vastly better than any other company. No, there's no company even close to the inference efficiency of Tesla. We've had to do that because we were constrained by the inference hardware in the car. We didn't have a choice. But that will pay dividends in many ways.
Thank you. The third question is, what is Tesla's current assessment of the pathway towards regulatory approval for unsupervised FSD in the US? And how should we think about the appropriate safety threshold compared to human drivers?
Sure. I can start. There are a handful of states that already have adopted autonomous vehicle laws. These states are paving the way for operations, while the data for such operations guides a broader adoption of driverless vehicles. I think Ashok can talk a little bit about our safety methodology, but we expect that these states and the work ongoing, as well as the data that we're providing, will pave the way for a broad-based regulatory approval in the US at least, and then other countries as well.
Yeah. It's actually been pretty helpful that other autonomous car companies have been cutting a path through the regulatory jungle. That's actually quite helpful. And they have obviously been operating in San Francisco for a while. I think they got approval for City of LA. So these approvals are happening rapidly. I think if you've got at scale a statistically significant amount of data that shows conclusively that the autonomous car has, let's say, half the accident rate of a human-driven car, I think that's difficult to ignore, because at that point, stopping autonomy means killing people. So I actually do not think that there will be significant regulatory barriers, provided there is conclusive data that the autonomous car is safer than a human-driven car. And in my view, this will be much like elevators. Like, elevators used to be operated by a guy with a relay switch, but sometimes that guy would get tired or drunk or just make a mistake and shear somebody in half between floors. So now we just get in an elevator and press a button. We don't think about it. In fact, it's kind of weird if somebody's standing there with a relay switch. That'll be how cars work. You just summon a car using your phone. You get in, it takes you to a destination, you get out.
You don't even think about it.
You don't even think about it. Just like an elevator. It takes you to your floor. That's it. Don't think about how the elevator is working or anything like that. Now, something I should clarify is that Tesla will be operating the fleet. So you can think of like how Tesla, think of Tesla like, I don't know, some combination of Airbnb and Uber, meaning that, there'll be some number of cars that Tesla owns itself and operates in the fleet. There'll be some number of cars, and then there'll be a bunch of cars where they're owned by the end user, but that end user can add or subtract their car to the fleet whenever they want. And they can decide if they want to only let the car be used by friends and family, or only by 5-star users, or by anyone. And at any time, they could have the car come back to them and be exclusively theirs, like an Airbnb. You could rent out your guest room or not anytime you want. As our fleet grows, we have 7 million cars, 9 million cars, eventually tens of millions of cars worldwide. With a constant feedback loop, every time something goes wrong, that gets added to the training data, and you get this training flywheel happening in the same way that Google search has the sort of flywheel. It's very difficult to compete with Google because people are constantly doing searches and clicking, and Google's getting that feedback loop. It's the same with Tesla, but at a scale that is maybe difficult to comprehend, but ultimately be tens of millions. I think there's also some potential here for an AWS element down the road, where if we've got very powerful inference, because we've got a hardware 3 in the cars, but now all cars are being made with hardware 4. Hardware 5 is pretty much designed and should be in cars hopefully towards the end of next year. And there's a potential to have to run, when the car is not moving, to actually run distributed inference. So kind of like AWS, but distributed inference. Like, it takes a lot of computers to train an AI model, but many orders of magnitude less compute to run it. So if you can imagine future paths where there's a fleet of 100 million Teslas, and on average they've got like maybe a kilowatt of inference compute, that's 100 gigawatts of inference compute distributed all around the world. It's pretty hard to put together 100 gigawatts of AI compute. And even in an autonomous future where the car is perhaps used, instead of being used 10 hours a week, is used 50 hours a week, that still leaves over 100 hours a week where the car inference computer could be doing something else. And it seems like it would be a waste not to use it.
Asher, do you want to chime in on peer process and safety?
Yeah, we have like multiple tiers of validating the safety. For like in any given week, we train hundreds of neural networks that can produce different trajectories for how to drive the car. We replay them through the millions of clips that we have already collected from our users and our own QA. Those are like critical events, like someone jumping out in front, or like other critical events that we have gathered a database over many, many years. And we replay through all of them to make sure that we are net improving safety. And on top of it, we have simulation systems that also try to recreate this and test this in closed loop fashion. Once all of this is validated, we give it to our own QA drivers. We have hundreds of them in different cities, in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Austin, New York, a lot of different locations. They are also driving this and collecting real world miles, and we have an estimate of what are the critical events, are they a net improvement compared to the previous week's builds, And once we have confidence that the build is a net improvement, then we start shipping to early users, like 2,000 employees initially, that they would like get the build. They would give feedback on like if it's an improvement or are they noticing some new issues that we did not capture in our own QA process. And only after all of this is validated, then we go to external customers. And even when we go external, we have like live dashboards of monitoring every critical event that's happening in the fleet, sorted by the criticality of it. So we are having a constant pulse on the build's quality and the safety improvement along the way. And then any failures, like Elon alluded to, you get the data back, add it to the training, and that improves the model in the next cycle. So we have this like constant feedback loop of issues, fixes, evaluations, and then it rinse and repeat. And especially with the new V2 architecture, all of this is automatically improving without requiring much engineering interventions, in the sense that engineers don't have to be creative in like how they code the algorithms. It's mostly learning on its own based on data. So you see that, okay, we failed here, or like this is how a person shows, this is how you drive this intersection or something like that. We get the data back, we add it to the neural network, and it learns from that training data automatically, instead of some engineers saying that, oh, here you must rotate the steering wheel by this much or something like that. There's no hard if-else conditions. Everything is neural network. It's very soft, it's probabilistic. So it will adapt its probability distribution based on the new data that it's getting.
Yeah, and we do have some insight into how good the things will be in, like, let's say 3 or 4 months, because we have advanced models that are far more capable than what is in the car, but have some issues with them that we need to fix. So there'll be a step change improvement in the capabilities of the car, but it'll have some quirks that are that need to be addressed in order to release it. As Ashok was saying, we have to be very careful in what we release to the fleet, or to customers in general. So like if we look at say 12.4 and 12.5, which are really could arguably even be version 13 and version 14, because it's pretty close to a total retrain of the neural nets in each case, or substantially different. So we have good insight into where the models, how well the car will perform in say 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, in terms of like scaling laws, people in the AI community generally talk about model scaling laws, where they increase the model size a lot, and then they have corresponding gains in performance. But we have also figured out scaling laws in other axes. In addition to the model size scaling, we can also have data scaling. You can increase the amount of data you use to train the neural network, and that also gives similar gains. And you can also scale up by training compute. You can train it for much longer and want more GPUs or more Dojo nodes, and that also gives better performance. And you can also have architecture scaling, where you come up with better architectures that for the same amount of compute produce better results. So a combination of model size scaling, data scaling, training compute scaling, and the architecture scaling, we can basically okay, if we continue scaling based on this ratio, we can sort of like predict future performance. Obviously, it takes time to do the experiments, because it takes few weeks to train. It takes few weeks to collect tens of millions of video clips and process all of them. But you can estimate what's going to be the future progress based on the trends that we have seen in the past, and they've generally held true based on the past data.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to the next question, which is, can we get an official announcement of the timeline for the $25,000 vehicle?
I think Elon mentioned it in the opening remarks, but as he mentioned, we're updating our future vehicle lineup to accelerate the launch of our low-cost vehicles in a more CapEx efficient way. That's our mission, to get the most affordable cars to customers as fast as possible. These new vehicles will be built on our existing lines in open capacity, and that's a major shift, to utilize all our capacity with marginal CapEx before we go spend high CapEx to do anything.
Yeah, we'll talk about this more on August 8th. But really the way to think of Tesla is almost entirely in terms of solving autonomy and being able to turn on that autonomy for a gigantic fleet. And I think it might be the biggest asset value appreciation in history when that day happens, when you can do unsupervised full self-driving.
5 million cars.
Yeah.
Oh, a little less.
Well,
Some of those have, yeah.
it'll be 7 million cars, in a year or so. And then 10 million, and then eventually we're talking about tens of millions of cars. Not eventually, it's like before the end of this. Before the end of the decade, it's several tens of millions of cars, I think.
Thank you. The next question is, what is the progress of Cybertruck ramp?
I can take that one too. Cybertruck hit 1K a week just a couple weeks ago. This happened in the first 4 to 5 months since we SOP'd late last year. Of course, volume production is what matters. That's what drives costs, and so our costs are dropping. But the ramp still faces a lot of challenges with so many new technologies, some supplier limitations, et cetera, and we'll continue to ramp this year, just focusing on cost efficiency and quality.
Okay, thank you. The next question, have any of the legacy automakers contacted Tesla about possibly licensing FSD in the future?
We're in conversations with one major automaker regarding licensing FSD.
Thank you. The next question is about the robotaxi unveil. Elon already talked about that, so we'll have to wait till August. The following question is about the next generation vehicle. We already talked about that. So let's go to the Semi. What is the timeline for scaling Semi? I think
sure. So we're finalizing the engineering of the Semi to enable a super cost-effective, high-volume production with our learnings from our fleet and our pilot fleet and Pepsi's fleet, which we're expanding this year marginally. In parallel, as we showed in the shareholders deck, we have started construction on the factory in Reno. Our first vehicles are planned for late 2025 with external customers starting in 2026.
Okay, a couple more questions. So our favorite, can we make FSD transfer permanent until FSD is fully delivered with level 5 autonomy?
No.
Okay, next question. What is gating the production ramp at Lathrop? Where do you see the megapack run rate at the end of the year? Mike?
Yeah, Lathrop is ramping as planned. We have our second GA line allowing us to increase our exit rate from 20 gigawatt hours per year at the start of this year to 40 gigawatt hours per year by the end of the year. That line's commissioned. There's really nothing limiting the ramp. It's given the longer sales cycles for these large projects, we typically have order visibility 12 to 24 months prior to ship dates. So we're able to plan the build plan several quarters in advance. So this allows us to ramp the factory to align with the business and order growth. Lastly, we'd like to thank our customers globally for their trust in Tesla as a partner for these incredible projects.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to analyst questions. The first question comes from Tony Sacconaghi from Bernstein. Tony, please go ahead and unmute.
Thank you for taking the question. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on kind of the new vehicles that you talked about today. Are these tweaks on existing models, given that they're going to be running on the same lines, or are these new models, and how should we think about them, in the context of the Model 3 Highland update? What will these models be like relative to that? And given the quick time frame, Model 3 Highland has required a lot of work and a lot of retooling. Maybe you can help put that all in context. Thank you. And I have a follow-up, please.
I think we've said all we will on that front. So what's your follow-up?
It's a more personal one for you, Elon, which is that you're leading many important companies right now. Maybe you can just talk about where your heart is at in terms of your interests, and do you expect to lessen your involvement with Tesla at any point over the next 3 years?
Well, Tesla constitutes the majority of my work time, and I work pretty much every day of the week. It's rare for me to take a Sunday afternoon off. So I'm going to make sure Tesla is very prosperous, and it is. I think it is prosperous, and it will be very much so in the future.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Adam Jonas from Morgan Stanley. Adam, please go ahead and unmute.
Okay, great. Hey, Elon. So you and your team on volume expect a 2024 growth rate notably lower than that achieved in 2023. But what's your team's degree of confidence on growth above 0%? Or in other words, does that statement leave room for potentially lower sales year on year?
No, I think we'll have higher sales this year than last year.
Okay. My follow-up, Elon, on future product. If you had nailed execution, assuming that you nail execution on your next gen cheaper vehicles, more aggressive giga castings, I don't want to say one piece, but getting closer to one piece, structural pack, unboxed, 300-mile range, $25,000 price point, putting aside robotaxi, those features unique to you, how long would it take your best Chinese competitors to copy a cheaper and better vehicle that you could offer a couple of years from now? How long would it take your best Chinese competitors to copy that? Thanks.
I mean, I don't know what our competitors could do, except we've done relatively better than they have. If you look at the drop in our competitors in China sales versus our drop in sales, our drop was less than theirs. So we're doing well. But I think Kathy Wood said it best. Like, really, we should be thought of as an AI or robotics company. If you value Tesla as just like an auto company, you just have to fundamentally. It's just the wrong framework, and it will come to. If you ask the wrong question, then the right answer is impossible. So. I mean, if somebody doesn't believe Tesla's going to solve autonomy, I think they should not be an investor in the company. Like that is, but we will, and we are. And then you have a car that goes from 10 hours of use a week, like an hour and a half a day, to probably 50, but it costs the same.
I think that's the key thing to remember, right? Especially if you look at FSD supervised. If you didn't believe in autonomy, they should give you a preview that this is coming. It's actually getting better day by day.
Yeah, if you've not tried the FSD 12.3, and like I said, 12.4 is going to be significantly better, and 12.5 even better than that, and we have visibility into those things, then you really don't understand what's going on. It's not possible.
Yeah, and that's why we can't just look at just as a car company, because a car company would just have a car. But here we have more than a car company because the cars can be autonomous. And like I said, it's happening.
Yeah, this is all in addition to Tesla. It's working. The overall AI community is just like improving rapidly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're putting the actual auto in automobile. So, so sort of a lot of it be like, well, sort of like, tell us about future horse carriages you're making. I'm like, well, actually, it doesn't need a horse. That's the whole point. And that's really the whole point.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Alex Potter from Piper Sandler. Alex, please go ahead and unmute.
Great, thanks. So couldn't agree more. The thesis hinges completely on AI, the future of AI, full self-driving, neural net training, all of these things. In that context, Elon, you've spoken about your desire to obtain 25% voting control of the company. And I understand completely why that would be. So I'm not necessarily asking about that. I'm asking if you've come up with any mechanism by which you can ensure that you'll obtain that level of voting control, because if not, then the core part of the thesis could potentially be at risk. So any additional commentary you might have on that topic?
Well, I think no matter what, Tesla, even if I got kidnapped by aliens tomorrow, Tesla will solve autonomy, maybe a little slower, but it would solve autonomy for vehicles at least. I don't know if it would win on with respect to Optimus or with respect to future products, but it would that there's enough momentum for Tesla to solve autonomy, even if I disappeared for vehicles. Now, there's
Okay.
a whole range of things we can do in the future beyond that. I'd be more reticent with respect to Optimus. You know, if we have a super sentient humanoid robot that can follow you indoors and that you can't escape, you know, we're talking Terminator level risk, then yeah, I'd be uncomfortable with, you know, if there's not some meaningful level of influence over how that is deployed. You know, if there's, you know, shareholders have an opportunity to ratify or re-ratify the sort of competition. I guess I can't say that. Whatever, but that is a fact. They have an opportunity.
Okay. Very good.
And yeah, we'll see. If the company generates a lot of positive cash flow, we could obviously buy back shares.
All right, that's actually all very helpful context. Thank you. Maybe one final question, then I'll pass it on. OpEx reductions. Thank you for quantifying the impact there. I'd be interested also in potentially more qualitative discussion of what the implications are for these headcount reductions. What are the types of activities that you're presumably sacrificing as a result of parting ways with these folks? Thanks very much.
So, you know, like we said, we've done these headcount reductions across the board. And, you know, as companies grow over time, you know, there are certain redundancies, there's some duplication of efforts which happens in certain areas. So you need to go back and look at where all these pockets are, get rid of it. So we're basically going through that exercise wherein we're like, hey, how do we set this company right for the next phase of growth? And the way to think about it is, you know, any tree which grows, it needs pruning. This is the pruning exercise which we went through. And at the end of it, we'll be much stronger and much more resilient to deal with the future, because the future is really bright. Like I said in my opening remarks, we just have to get through this period and get there.
Yeah, we're not giving up anything that it's significant that I'm aware of. So we've had a long period of prosperity from 2019 to now, and you know, so if a company sort of organizationally is 5% wrong per year, you know, that accumulates to 25-30% of inefficiency. We've made some corrections along the way, but it is time to reorganize the company for the next phase of growth. And you really need to reorganize it, just like a human. When we start off as one cell and become a zygote and blastocyst, and you start growing arms and legs, and briefly you have a tail. And so.
But you shed the tail.
You shed the tail, hopefully, and then you're a baby. And you basically you have to be different. The organism, a company is kind of like, you know, a creature growing, and if you don't reorganize it for different phases of growth, it will fail. You can't have the same organizational structure if you're, you know, 10 cells versus 100 versus 1 million versus 1 billion versus 1 trillion. You know, where humans are like around 35 trillion cells. It doesn't feel like it. Feels like, you know, feel like one person, but you know, you're basically a walking cell colony of roughly 35 trillion, depending on your body mass, and about 3 times that number in bacteria. So anyway, you've got to reorganize the company for a new phase of growth, or it will fail to achieve that growth.
节目最后，如果本期资讯对你有所帮助，请您点赞、评论、订阅并打开小铃铛，这样您就不会错过本频道的最新内容。谢谢。